Decentralization is a hedge against the corrupting nature of centralized power. So what does decentralized science have to do with government and pharmaceutical companies? Last month, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy stated that starting in 2026, any scientific publication that receives federal funding will need to be openly accessible on the day that it's published. And in the pharma space, Pfizer recently announced that they will invest $500,000 into VitaDAO, which is a new cooperative vehicle for community-governed and decentralized drug development. So what does all this mean for the future of science research and publishing? Today, we're going to talk about two key issues with the current academic research landscape and how decentralized science is trying to fix it. The first issue being the funding of research, and the second being the publishing of that research. What's up everyone, I hope you're doing well. If you're new to the channel, my name is Chirag Lathia and I make videos on life science and business topics. I find it truly fascinating that the same companies and centralized structures that have benefited from siloed research and development are now making a push into decentralized science. So today we're going to discuss the trend of cryptocurrency and the principles of decentralization to advance science, and whether it's legitimate or a technologist fantasy. If that sounds interesting to you, be sure to leave a like on this video, because that lets me know to make future videos on the same topic. Without further ado, let's dive in. At its core, biopharma value is IP rights, domain-specific know-how, and research data. Research and development has been criticized as being prohibitively expensive and siloed, largely due to the way IP business models incentivize monopolization of innovation. This is done through the creation of things like patent tickets in protected portfolios. These IP mechanisms can prevent open sharing of research data, inherently disincentivizing collaboration and transparency. They can also prevent the public and patients from having any real ownership in biopharma IP, despite their tax dollars funding most early-stage development. And outside of grants to fund basic research, early-stage funding for drug development is extremely limited. Unfortunately, the scientific publishing system is set up so the government doesn't have broad access to the research it's funding. Instead, access is predicated on individual paid subscriptions to the journals that the work is published in. There are two trends that have undercut this limitation. The first being the rise of open access journals, which charge an upfront fee to the researchers and then provide anyone with internet service access to the final publication. The second is the trend towards preprints. Preprint servers provide access to manuscripts submitted to publishers for peer review, and their use in biological sciences has expanded considerably during the COVID-19 pandemic. But now there's a new third trend that has emerged in the crypto space known as decentralized science. Decentralized science has lofty promises of a world where patients and their families can directly fund scientists developing the next breakthrough drug or treatment. They envision a world in which drug development is a collaborative, transparent process with no gatekeepers. So what exactly is decentralized science and why should you care? Well, it's hard to categorize something that doesn't have clear leadership or organization. But based on my research, I see three key common aims of decentralized science. The first being to free up research data, like test results and studies, from behind paywalls and eliminate the reliance and trust on middlemen, like publishing giants. The second is to make collaboration easier among scientists around the world. And the third is to change the way scientific research is funded. First, let's define decentralization. At its core, it's an attempt to distribute who has the authority to say what is the truth. In the case of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, that would mean away from the Federal Reserve. And now with decentralized science, it would mean away from traditional academia. Many crypto figureheads, particularly on Twitter, believe that centralized research has run its course. They cite that favoritism is at play when it's the same cohort that has received NIH grants year over year, evidence that funding has become a political process that is ossified. This leads to biased research and ultimately less innovation, as we only get the opportunity to fund the same select group of people. Additionally, scientists struggling with funding often abandon more radical, riskier ideas for safe, predictable ones. Scientists often prefer topics yielding statistically significant results and a publishable dataset. Unfortunately, this introduces significant topic selection bias, as highlighted in a report by the NBER. As a result, proponents of decentralization prefer things in open source, where people can experiment and share insights publicly online. This is where riskier, early-stage exploratory research can take place that could arguably move science forward. Now that we have a basic understanding of the principles underlying decentralization and the issues at play, what can be done? So we know that people who believe in decentralization believe that individual people can reduce the power of large structures by circumventing them altogether. For example, with cryptocurrencies, the goal isn't to abolish the Federal Reserve, but to provide a vehicle to opt out if you so wish. From a science and technology standpoint, someone with a good scientific idea could make a startup or follow a program like a Teal Fellowship. This way they could opt out of a political grant process. The idea with decentralized science is to provide a new funding source for smart researchers where anyone can contribute. Decentralized science uses cryptocurrencies to let people pool capital to fund research. They would fund independent investigators at a relatively low cost for a 1 to 3 year contract. This is in contrast to traditional academia, where if you write a grant, you've likely done some of the science already and received the grant for research that you haven't done yet. Now that we've talked about the fundraising issues around research, let's switch gears and talk about how research gets published. There is a vision for decentralized science to circumvent the control that publishing companies have on science. The scientific research space has long been controlled by a handful of publishing companies that decide which research projects are worth publishing. Additionally, these companies hold back the collaboration of science by publishing records behind paywalls. I was happy to see that the US government is pushing to get research that has been publicly funded toward open access, so people can get access to papers that they help fund via their tax dollars. President Biden said it most succinctly: the taxpayers fund $5 billion a year in cancer research, but once it's published, nearly all of that taxpayer-funded research sits behind the paid walls of a journal. Interestingly enough, the government stance is along the same vein of decentralized science. They want to remove barriers to collaboration by letting people openly publish their research. Crypto influencers like Balaji Srinivasan take this idea much further. They state that unless they can produce every aspect of the paper, they don't believe the paper. Those that have collected a dataset use some sort of analog to digital interface and then publish the PDF as the paper. He argues that the digital aspect of that paper should be truly reproducible research rather than a static PDF. In other words, give someone the source code of the digital aspect of the paper, and that code will take the data collected and make graphs and figures that have been published in the paper on the fly. Researchers often don't have the words to describe every parameter they use, but the source code that they created will help them tell the story. And with truly reproducible research that's decentralized, that code or data or PDF is not simply online, but also on-chain. That means that it's outside of academic paywalls and is truly public. The blockchain helps provide an immutable record, so that there's a change log if the paper needs to be changed. Truly archival publishing means that you would not be able to delete papers from record and only append them if necessary. This is in contrast to centralized servers, where you can do whatever you want. He goes even further. He states that once you start putting papers on the chain, a citation could be a function call. This could be a really useful tool for collaboration and citation between scientists. Let's say, for example, you're citing a paper that you're using to generate a graph, like a statistics or bioinformatics paper. If you can import their source code that they use to generate their graph, you could apply it to your dataset, and so you guarantee that you're not playing any shell games with your paper. Right now, since many papers are hidden behind paywalls, this sort of function calling doesn't really exist yet, but it could be extremely helpful for pushing science forward. Additionally, if we don't have full traceability back to the source paper, it's possible for things to become apocryphal or lost in translation along the way. Oftentimes, when you trace some facts back to the original paper, they might not actually say what you think it says. And so this becomes a big game of citation telephone. And the paywalls introduced often make it harder to perform this traceback in the first place. So we can see the digital part of the paper could be replicated on your computer locally. But what about the physical measurement? Everyone doesn't have scientific tools like a sequencer or a super collider at their disposal. So eventually you may get crypto-friendly instruments. This means that any data that's collected as part of a paper will have metadata, so you can check for batch effects and remove things like spurious correlations. And you would record the metadata as part of the paper, so you would provide a digital chain of custody. So whatever the results are, you'd have to report it on chain. He ends with the following: if you're doing something for publication or basing multi-billion-dollar decisions on a paper, you need to have respect for the people on the other end that can reproduce every aspect. Otherwise, it's simply not science, but proclamation from a priesthood. If you can give other scientists the tools to reproduce the results at the lowest level, you minimize the need for trust. And thus, you can say to the public or other scientists that we've given you all the tools to reproduce the experiment on your own. And so we can begin to move away from relying on the trust of the status of a journal or the track record of an individual. So to summarize, we talked about two trends in the research space. One, to decentralize funding sources, and we actually see Pfizer dipping their toes in VitaDAO. And two, we see a trend to decentralize the publishing of research. And we actually see the US government getting involved. And we talked about why cryptocurrency experts believe that this will lead to better science down the road. So with all that said, let's get a good discussion going in the comments below. Let me know what you think about decentralized science. Do you think that this will ever happen in the future, or is this some sort of technologist fantasy? I will read all your comments and reply. If this video gets a strong response, I'll consider making more videos about decentralized science and crypto. It is really fascinating and it is a nascent space. Please also consider sharing this video with a friend if you learned something new. I will also place a few links down below with my favorite services that I use on a daily basis. If you enjoyed the content and you made it this far, please subscribe if you haven't yet. With that said, thank you so much for watching and see you soon.